Welcome to the Week 7 edition of the Steel Scorpion Sports Guess the Line podcast. I'm half your hosting team, Jeff Miller.
And I'm Mark Heflin.
I hear Bill Simmons has been reassigned to the Rio de Janeiro branch and may be appearing on ESPN Oto now. So hopefully, if that stays the case, you and I can maybe keep this going.
He might be, and we actually wouldn't know it, but I think he's actually just suspended and returning, I think, in a couple of days, probably on Tuesday or Wednesday this week.
So he's not learning Portuguese?
Not that we know of for sure.
My fault. So then I guess this will be the final installment. And for those that don't recall the stakes, at the end of tonight's podcast, either Mark or myself will have his team renamed by the other in the Jaguar League. It's Steel Scorpion Sports. So check us out at steelscorpionsports.com. Check out the blog page. You'll be able to pick up the podcast there and also see the results and the new team names and all the mocking that goes along with that when I rename Mark's team after tonight.
We shall see.
But Mark, before we jump into the line game, I know you like to give us some of the background about the gambling and Las Vegas line settings, so why don't you give us the year-to-date update?
So in Week 6, through the Sunday night game, favorites won 7, and the dogs covered 7. And for year-to-date, the favorites are ahead 44-43 with 3 ties. And Week 6 was a good week for the overs. We had 9 overs against just 5 unders. And year-to-date, we have 49 overs to 41 unders.
So it sounds like the year of the dog hasn't quite materialized yet, but the year of the over with all these new don't breathe on the offensive player or you get a penalty may be influencing the points scored.
Yes. When in doubt, take the over, at least so far this year.
All right. Well, that's some interesting tidbits to keep in mind as we set the lines for tonight. With that in mind, let's jump into the Thursday night game for this Week 7 in the NFL, and it's the New York Jets at the New England Patriots.
So Thursday night games, as we know, have been mostly blowouts. In fact, they were all blowouts until Week 6. We had the Colts and the Texans actually played a 5-point game, though it looked like it was going to be a blowout in the first quarter. And I think we might be headed back to blowout territory here. We have a very bad 1-5 Jets team playing at New England, who kind of didn't have their groove going on the first few weeks, but they've won their last 2 after that Monday night debacle in Kansas City. They look pretty good today in Buffalo. They're a public team. They're going to get lots of money. I think the spread needs to be pretty big. I picked the Patriots as a 10.5-point favorite.
10.5 is a big number, but I also agree with most of what you said there. Didn't quite go as high as you. I figured some of the New York money might offset that, so I went with 8.5.
I am off to a 1-0 start. The actual line is 10, and I should once again mention, for anyone who's listening for the first time, I have all of these spreads. I took them from sportsbook.com, and 13 of the 15 games were available there, and then there were 2 games that were not listed on sportsbook.com that I took from footballlocks.com, but this is one of the ones that was on Sportsbook, and it's on the board at 10.
Well, that is an unfortunate start for me, but I fully intend to make this up later in the podcast.
We shall see. I will go ahead and give you a warning right now that I nailed the next one completely. So why don't you go ahead and kick off the analysis on the Bengals at the Colts.
Well, the Bengals luckily did not lose to the Carolina Panthers this week, but they did not win versus the Carolina Panthers, our first tie in a number of seasons, I believe. And I think the last time I remember a tie in Cincinnati might have been the famous Donovan McNabb. I didn't even know we could tie a game. That's pretty awesome. Good little trivia tidbit there. The Colts, on the other hand, went down to Houston, as you already mentioned, had a great start to the game, hung on to win the game in the first close Thursday night game, but have that mini bye then. So after a grueling overtime game, Cincinnati now has to go on the road to Indy, who's had the extra rest. I think Vegas is now going to like Indy. The public's starting to like Indy. Everybody loves Andrew Luck. He's been having a great year. But Cincinnati's still a good team. 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the last undefeated team and perhaps a Super Bowl contender. So you're not going to see too big of a number here. But I went with the Colts as a 4-point favorite.
Okay. Before I give the number, I'll give a couple of interesting tidbits. The Bengals technically were the last team to lose this year, probably because they played on the Sunday night last week when they lost at New England, and Arizona had lost earlier in the day. But interestingly enough, it's now October 12th. the Bengals were the last team to lose, but their last win was on September 21st, because after that they had a bye, then the loss at the Patriots, and then the tie this week. And then I had read somewhere that Charlotte and Cincinnati, they both have a nickname of the Queen City, and the Mayors had a bet on this game that whichever team won would officially get to have the nickname of the Queen City. And so, of course, they tied. So I haven't seen the resolution, but I guess they'll still just both keep calling themselves the Queen City until they play again 4 years from now. But much of the same reasons that you said as far as the Colts. They have a little bit extra rest. We already know that A.J. Green was out in Week 6, and it's been announced, at least I've heard, that he's almost definitely out for Week 7 as well. And so I thought that the Colts would be a 3.5-point favorite. And as I already mentioned, I know that one. They are 3.5 points. And so I'm ahead 2-0 so far.
Well, bad luck for me. That 4-point guess was pretty accurate, and yet I lost. So why don't you take us through the next game on the docket? It's Atlanta at Baltimore.
All right, Falcons at the Ravens. The Ravens looked pretty good today. Went down to Tampa and just blew the Bucs out of the water. Joe Flacco with 5 TDs in about 3 minutes into the second quarter. Was starting to think that he might go for 7 or maybe even set the record at 8, but of course they, pulled the pedal off the gas and started running a little bit more after that. But, they looked really good. The 4-2 on the year. The Falcons have looked pretty bad recently. They've lost 3 straight. I think they've lost all their games since they blew Tampa Bay out. But they're traveling to Baltimore. I picked Baltimore as a 7.5-point favorite.
You went with the hook. See, I agree with everything you said. Atlanta's been up and down. Baltimore looked great today. But I went with a straight 7.
You nailed that one on the head. I should not have added the hook. The line is 7, so you're going to get that one. So I am now ahead 2-1, and you can kick us off with the next game, the Titans at Washington.
Well, luckily, Tennessee did beat Jacksonville this week, which still does qualify as a win in the NFL, contrary to popular belief, or else this would have been a game that would have been taken off the board in Vegas or moved to Saturday because they would have assumed it was a college game, not a pro game. Because these two teams do not incite a lot of betting and do not incite a lot of excitement. Washington went out to the desert, turned the ball over 4 times, pick 6. Kirk Cousins proving that he is not the successor to RG3. Washington in a world of hurt now. Tennessee unable to do much of anything with Charlie Whitehurst at quarterback. Jake Locker always hurt. They barely got by a Jacksonville team in Tennessee. That doesn't exude a lot of confidence going on the road then to Washington. So as we've always said, a home team basically gets 3 points for home field advantage. I figured with Washington being an NFC East team, a little more money riding there, that it'd be a 3.5, just throwing the hook in.
Wow, 3.5. So I was a little more overconfident in Washington, I guess you could say. I picked them at 5.5-point favorite. They're not a great team, but I figured being home and the performance that Tennessee had today at home to Jacksonville, they almost lost that game. I know they led for a good portion of it, but then they let Jacksonville score within the last minute. Jacksonville recovered the onside kick, messed up the field goal situation when they still had 12 seconds left to gain a few more yards. But Jacksonville had been 0-5 against the spread until they met the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, I picked Washington's 5.5. The actual line is 4. So you were a half-point off. You're going to get that one, and we're now tied 2-2.
Yes, don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years, or at least 2 weeks. And with that, Seattle is at St. Louis, Mark. Why don't you give us your thoughts on that?
So we have a divisional matchup here between the Seahawks and the Rams. The Seahawks, of course, lost at home today, which is a very surprising result. I think I'd seen that Russell Wilson was somewhere around 47-1 at home coming into this game. Of course, not quite that good. He hasn't been around for that many games at home, but still, I think he'd only lost once at home prior to this game. Cowboys, unbelievably somehow, are 5-1. We'll get to them later. Seahawks on the road, clearly the better team than the Rams. The Rams are going to be on a little bit of a short week because they play in the Monday night game, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to look when they host the 49ers on Monday night, but I pegged the Seahawks as a 6-point favorite.
Yeah, I think St. Louis getting San Francisco this week and then Seattle next week, that's 2 physical, imposing teams. That is not going to bode well for them. I would even imagine after these two games, they're going to be beat up, and it's going to hurt them later in the season. But after a tough, short week, after playing San Francisco, like you, I thought Seattle would rebound, but I only said it would be a 5.5 point spread for Seattle.
Okay, I'm going to get this one. The actual line is a full 7-point touchdown favorite for the Seahawks. So that puts me at 3-2 through 5 games. And then why don't you get started on the Browns at the Jaguars?
Well, luckily, as you've already mentioned, Jacksonville finally covered a spread. So for those of you in the betting public that were worried about ever betting on them again or had always bet against them, now you have to at least think for a moment. Cleveland, on the other hand, took what was a close to a pick-em in most people's minds with Pittsburgh and just annihilated the Steelers. Now, the Steelers have had some injuries on defense, but Ben Roethlisberger came in 18-1 against the Browns all time. I believe now he's 18-2, and I believe we were all pretty sure he was going to be 18-2 after the first half. So Cleveland, with a semi-effective Brian Hoyer and an effective running game, their defense is playing pretty well. They're actually not a horrible team. We'll talk about it on our podcast later this week, Mark, but I think Cleveland, of all the teams that we left out of our discussion for potential playoff teams, might be the one that is feeling the most overlooked and might have the biggest gripe with us. So good for you, Browns. That being said, I don't see any way Jacksonville stays in any game, let alone a game against a competent team, but no one's going to put a ton of money on Cleveland. It seems like a game that Cleveland should be favored by more than I'm going to favor them by, but just knowing how Vegas sets these, I said they'll probably be like a 3.5-point favorite.
I am going to get you by a 0.5 point. I agree with most of what you said. I went slightly higher. I had the Browns as a 4-point favorite. Vegas actually has them as a 5-point favorite. I actually had 2 tidbits for this game. You already covered one of them. Ben Roethlisberger was 18-1 coming into this game against the Browns, and I actually saw that as a reason for a few quote-unquote experts saying that you should bet the Steelers. You know, they look at the trends and they go a lot with, you know, this team is so-and-so against the spread over the last 2 or 3 years, and so they were saying, you know, ride that 18-1. Well, trends don't always hold up, and they do eventually end sometimes, and now he's 18-2, but again, you know, they've already played twice this year, but next year, people are going to tell you to take the Steelers against the Browns because Big Ben is 18-2 all time against Cleveland, but we'll see how that works out next year. The other tidbit is the Jags have scored 17 points or less in 8 straight games. That is just a downright pathetic offense if I've ever heard one. So anyway, it's a 5-point spread. I'm now ahead 4-2, and I'll get us started on the next one, which is Vikings at the Bills. The Bills put up a little bit of a fight with the Patriots today, but just couldn't hang with them. The Vikings, on the other hand, playing at home against the Lions. The Lions were out Reggie Bush. They were out Calvin Johnson, and it didn't matter. They destroyed Teddy Bridgewater. Bridgewater looked like the rookie that he is. He had 3 interceptions, got sacked 8 times. They just were not in the game at all. And so based on the combination of those things and the Bills being at home, I picked the Bills as a 7-point favorite.
Wow, full touchdown. A little richer than I was willing to go, but all the reasons you said apply, and also you mentioned Teddy Bridgewater as a rookie, but now he'll be a rookie on the road. So he's having these problems playing in the semi-friendly outdoor confines of Target Field or whatever they want to call it now. Moving to Buffalo, you know the fan base is excited. They had the new owners there today. The crowd will be, I'm sure they'll do some gimmicky promotion to make sure the crowd's really up for that game, and this gives them a chance to get another win, stay in playoff contention. So I definitely like Buffalo's chances, but I did not go the full touchdown. I went Buffalo -6.
You're going to get this one. The actual line is 4.5, and I think that number's low. You know, we can at the end of this, we'll kind of talk about which teams that we like for survivor pools or for teasers or for some straight up action. But you know, I picked 7 and it's 4.5. Obviously, I have more confidence in the Bills than the line is showing right now. But I don't see the Bills losing at home to the Vikings.
Interesting. Yeah, I would agree with you there. I don't see that, and I think you're right. That may be one we want to put a little coin on.
Exactly. So through 7 games, I have 4. You have 3. And why don't you get started on Dolphins at the Bears?
So the Dolphins played a really nice game, a tough game with Green Bay. Actually had the game in hand, it seemed, until they left too much time on the clock and let Aaron Rodgers drive down the field, fake spike them a la Dan Marino. How apropos is that? Doing that against the Dolphins in Miami. And then throwing the touchdown to basically win the game, a few seconds left. So Miami's going to be a little heartbroken. Also, the trends in Miami don't hold when they go on the road. In Miami, especially in September and October, the temperatures are usually up compared to what northern teams are used to, and the humidity's high. So it's actually a good place to be betting Miami. They go on the road. It's not always as good. Chicago, on the other hand, had a good game versus Atlanta. Jay Cutler actually threw for a good number of yards. The running game got going. Matt Forte had his best game of the season, I believe. All that being said, I like Chicago in this spot. They're getting Miami coming off that emotional loss, coming up to them in Chicago. Chicago coming off a nice win, knowing they need to keep winning to keep pace with Green Bay and Detroit. I think Vegas is going to be thinking more along my lines, and they're going to say Chicago, 4-point favorite.
Okay. I agree with most of what you said, although I went a little bit higher. I just think the Bears are a better team. I thought they were about a 3-point better team, and then when you throw in the home field advantage, I picked the Bears as a 6-point favorite. Though in reality, maybe Chicago should actually be getting points at home because they're actually 0-2 at home, but 3-1 on the road. And one of those home losses was to the Bills, who, in week 1, it was quite a surprising loss. Now, we see Buffalo's 3-3. They're probably not as bad as people thought they might be coming into the season, but you had the Bears as a 6-point favorite. You had them as 4. You nailed it on the head. It actually is a 4-point game. And through 8 games, we are trading back and forth here. It is now 4-4. And I will get us started on the next one, which is Saints at the Lions. Now, I should say this is one of the 2 games that is not listed on sportsbook.com yet. The only reason I can think of is that maybe they're still waiting to see what the status is going to be of Megatron or Jimmy Graham. Now, I've heard that Jimmy Graham is going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks, even after the bye week, and Megatron might be back for this game, might not, so maybe that's why it's not on the line. But the Lions at home, they looked good this week, but again, they were playing a rookie QB. That could be a factor. The Saints, coming off the bye week, they're going to have an extra week of injury, but the top playmaker is not going to be on the field. Jimmy Graham's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks with an injured shoulder. So given that factor, I'd peg the Lions as a 4.5-point favorite.
And normally I would agree with you. The one thing I think that goes against that logic is New Orleans on the road is a poor team, except for they're playing in a dome. That's the one place New Orleans can play on the road. So I think if New Orleans, with the extra week, Drew Brees works some kinks out, even without Jimmy Graham, I think they'll keep it a little closer than that, or at least Vegas would assume that. And without Calvin Johnson, I think there is enough of an unknown there. And Reggie Bush, there were so many injuries on the Detroit side. I actually thought that home field advantage was worth 3. Detroit's slightly better team, so it'd be 3.5.
All right, you're going to get this one. The actual line is 2.5. So that gives you 3 in a row. You're now ahead 5-4 as we head down the stretch. And why don't you get us started on Panthers at the Packers?
So the Panthers did not lose at Cincinnati. That's the plus. For those of us that bet against them on the wins line for the season, though, they did not win at Cincinnati, so that's our plus. They were in the dreaded 37-37 tie, so good for them. It was a strange game, back and forth, long drives to start overtime to get those field goals, left very little time to do anything but have one last drive where Cincinnati missed a field goal. So Carolina probably going to feel like they just kissed their sister, as they say, and they're going to go up to Green Bay. Green Bay coming off that emotional win. They have to feel really good. They went down to a pretty tough place to play early in the season, as I said. Miami does a lot better at home when the heat and humidity are up, especially against northern teams. So Green Bay, with Aaron Rodgers, able to overcome that. Eddie Lacy, unfortunately, did not get on track a second game. I think we may have already seen his high watermark for the season. That's unfortunate for Eddie Lacy owners. But Green Bay at home is a different animal, and the public still likes Green Bay. Everybody knows Aaron Rodgers. He's got those cool commercials where he discount double checks his way through whatever is going on. Hans and Franz are in one. I mean, come on, if you can tap into 80s Saturday Night Live, then clearly America loves you. So I know the money's going to be flowing on the Green Bay side. Carolina is a no-name team that most people think probably is overachieved at this point, even with the tie. So I said Green Bay's probably going to be getting 7 points.
Wow, I agree with everything that you said. The Panthers don't have much of a run game unless it's Cam Newton. Besides him, they pretty much can't run the ball. Packers at home were pretty formidable. They're also a public team. I threw the hook in there. I had it at 7.5. You actually nailed the line right at 7. That now gives you 4 straight, and you are now ahead 6-4. I will get us started on the next one, which is Chiefs at the Chargers. Chargers were happy to get the win today. They actually went into Oakland. We kind of talked about that last week, that kind of a tough place for them to play. You would think that they would do much better. Oakland's not a very good team. Oakland's now 0-5, but they did put up quite a fight against San Diego. Maybe it's, since they were coming off their bye, maybe it's because of the motivation of the new coach, but they seem to be kind of firing on all cylinders today. But San Diego did stick it out, and they won in the end. Then you have the Chiefs coming off a bye. Andy Reid typically does really well coming off of a bye. We have a divisional game. We have the Chargers at home. They're clearly the better team. I pegged the Chargers as a 7-point favorite.
I agree with most of what you said. I took the Andy Reid coming off a bye and the Chargers playing opponents 2 weeks in a row off of byes in the division and having Denver the week after. I took a little more of that into account, thinking Vegas might look at this as another one of those games that San Diego could struggle with prior to heading out to Denver for the big showdown, which could be for the AFC West title at that point, or the inside track on the AFC West, if you will. So I did not give them the full touchdown. I only gave them 5.5 points of favoritism.
Okay. Well, you're going to get this one as well, and that makes 5 straight for you. The actual line is 5. So with 5 straight, you are now ahead 7-4. So from being down 2-4, you're now ahead 7-4. So you have a 3-game lead. We have 4 to go. I need to sweep all 4 of those to win, but I will tell you now that I nailed 2 of these final 4 on the head. So I do think I have somewhat of a chance, but we shall see. And why don't you get us started on the next one, which is the Cardinals at the Raiders.
Well, before I do, I think in golfing terminology, as we've modified the scoring system here. We're not using the modified Stableford scoring system, but we go with the halve holes, if you will, on a tie. So I think I might be dormy if I could just have one of these. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, I like using my Ryder Cup terminology before I forget it. All right, Arizona at Oakland. So I think we've already mentioned Oakland a number of times on other podcasts, even today. Oakland, not a very good team. I do think the reason they played well against San Diego is, 1, it's one of their biggest rivals. 2, it was the new coach. The first game for him, he buried the football or whatever crazy nonsense that was. I think what he should have done is maybe bury a few of the players that underperform. Maybe if that would free up salary cap space, that would have been even better. Probably wouldn't work. I don't know what the NFL rule is on that. Arizona, on the other hand, finally got a quarterback back under center that we've heard of. His name was Carson Palmer. He actually played pretty well. The defense also forced 4 turnovers from a non-elite Kirk Cousins, and they get to go from that to visiting a rookie QB in Derek Carr. So I think Arizona's defense is going to have a good day. If you're a fantasy owner of the Arizona Cardinals defense, I would not be afraid to start them this week. I know I will be. It's going to be quite fun. If you're in a multiplier league like ours, maybe this is week you multiply a defense for a change. But be that as it may, Oakland, not a huge betting team anymore for the public because, honestly, they haven't been relevant for a decade. Arizona doesn't draw a lot of interest. They're another West Coast team. It seems, East Coast bias and East Coast money is what drives lines. So I figured Arizona's the better team, but they're on the road, so there'll be slight play on that. So I said Arizona will probably be getting 3 points.
All right, well, this is one of the ones that I nailed on the head. I agree with most of what you said. The Cardinals' defense against the rookie, although Derek Carr, in fairness, did pretty well today. He had 4 touchdowns, but then he did throw the game-ending pick. Nice pick by the rookie, Jason Ferret. But I had the Cardinals as a 4-point favorite, and the line is 4. So I get this one to end your ridiculous 5-game winning streak. And we are now at 7-5. And then with 3 games to go, you have a 2-point lead. I will get us started on the next one, which is Giants at the Cowboys. The Cowboys, who would have thunk it going into the season, are 5-1. They're doing much better than anyone expected. A lot of people thought that, especially once Sean Lee went down, that their defense would just be abysmal this year, especially given how bad it was last year. And then you take DeMarcus Ware, Sean Lee off the team, but they've done pretty well. Somehow the reclamation project of Rolando McClain, ex-Raider, has done pretty well for them. So somehow they went into Seattle, as we mentioned earlier, and won, a place that Seattle does not usually lose at home. Now, the Giants had a really rough Sunday night game. Got shut out. I think it was the second shutout of the season this year. Lost 27-0 at Philly. And to rub salt into the wound, it's pretty clear that they've lost Victor Cruz for the rest of the season. I think he had a torn patella. I don't know if it's 100% official yet, but it looks like Cruz is probably out for the season. Given all those factors, given the fact that the Cowboys are at home, coming off of a big win, the Giants coming off of a big bad loss, the Cowboys being a public team, although the Giants kind of being a public team as well, I pegged the Cowboys as a 7.5-point favorite.
You threw the hook in. I went slightly under, and that, as you can imagine, means I didn't throw the hook in. Agreed with everything you said there. Loving DeMarco Murray, by the way. Couldn't believe that he put up 100 yards in Seattle. That defense, knowing that that's the guy to key on to stop Dallas from having any chance. Wow. I'm just in shock that Dallas is 5-1 and now atop the NFC East. Props to them and kudos to the GM that is Jerry Jones. Apparently he knows more than the rest of us. Good job, Jason Garrett. Good job, Cowboys all around. I honestly thought this would be a 6-10 season for the Cowboys. I figured this was the year they regressed from 8-8. I will take my humble pie now and say I was wrong. But that being said, Giants losing Victor Cruz, everything else you said, don't feel like the Giants can compete here, but I just went with a flat 7.
Well, you're going to get this because of the fact that it threw the hook in. The actual line is 6, which, I don't know, in my opinion, I think is too low, but we'll see. Maybe it'll adjust higher as the week goes on once the money starts coming in, but that now gives you an 8-5 lead with 2 games to go, so to give myself a chance here, I think I'm going to add a few college games onto the docket. And,
that seems fair.
See what happens.
I believe in golf terminology. We would call this at this point and say I'm 3-2, 3 up with 2 to play. That's beautiful. But in the interest of due diligence and fairness to San Francisco and Denver and Houston and Pittsburgh, why don't we just finish out anyway and make sure that those fans and those teams don't feel like we shorted them?
Sounds fair.
So I'll start then with San Francisco at Denver. So 49ers, we don't know the outcome of their game yet. I'm going out on a limb and saying they're going to win this week against Austin Davis and St. Louis. If that is the case, it will be the second time in 2 days that a San Francisco team has won in St. Louis. For those that are baseball fans or aficionados, you know that the Giants won game 1 in St. Louis. But I do believe San Francisco will have won in St. Louis, and now they'll get to turn around and go into Denver. That's not going to end quite as well as I anticipate tomorrow night's game will. Denver's coming off that nice win in New York. Even though Peyton Manning was under pressure a little early in the game, and there was some talk about, wow, he just doesn't play well in the Meadowlands, and they're getting in his head. At the end of the game, he still gets you 31 points. He gets you 3 touchdown passes, and it's considered an off day. I mean, Peyton Manning has set such a high standard for quarterbacking that we look at a 300-yard, 3-touchdown, 31-point performance by your team as kind of a bad game. So that's just impressive to me. That being said, you're going to the Mile High, love them at home, and I think that the public loves them as well. Vegas knows this. Peyton Manning will be going for the all-time touchdown record. How great was NBC's planning and scheduling for this? I don't know if the NFL and NBC sat together and charted out what they anticipated the games would be to get this on for Sunday Night Football. Beautiful planning, because I know all of us will be sitting there watching, and as he gets his first touchdown, we'll be waiting for the next one to tie the record with Brett Favre, and then every pass after that, we'll be wondering, is this the one that breaks the record? And being a personal fan of round numbers, I kind of hope he gets 4 so that we end up with 510. I really like round numbers. Very nice. Easy to discuss after the game, 510. So that being said, I think he is going to put on a show. He knows it's a big moment, and I think Denver's going to win. The public's going to think Denver's going to win, and Vegas is going to have to put a pretty hefty number out there, even against a good team. So I think they're going to put a full 7 on the Broncos.
Okay, so you say 7. I will second most of what you said. Before I get to my prediction, I will say that, this is clearly the marquee game of the weekend as Peyton goes for the record. Two things that I'll add is that, Jim Harbaugh, part of the reason he's in hot water with his players is that the rumors going around that, when he tried to recruit Peyton Manning when he was a free agent a couple of years ago, and then kind of lied about the circumstances to Alex Smith a little bit, and then got caught. So I'm sure Peyton has heard this. I think at some point during pregame warm-ups, when Jim Harbaugh comes over to talk to him and just kind of see how he's doing, as they tend to do, he should call an emergency press conference and say that Jim Harbaugh has just tried to recruit him again during the season, try to stir up some trouble, get Harbaugh in some hot water there, just for fun. And then you say that Manning is 2 touchdowns away from Brett Favre, but actually I have some sources that say that Favre kind of wants to hang on to this record. He's thinking of coming back. The Titans have reached out and made an offer to him, and the Titans will play earlier in the day at Washington, so it's possible that Favre will get a couple touchdowns in that game and maybe put the mark a little bit harder for Peyton to get in the Sunday night game. But same as you, I had the exact same number. I said Broncos -7, and we actually both know that the line is 7 at this point. So we're going to split this one, making it 8.5 to 5.5. And then I will
can you repeat that one more time? What's the score?
8.5 to 5.5.
With how many left?
With the Monday night game, plus I added some college games for next week. So we have Florida State at Notre Dame that we're going to do.
Oh, okay, good. Well then, before we get to those, why don't you take us through the real marquee matchup of the NFL week, the Monday nighter?
The Monday night game, not nearly as good of a matchup as the Sunday night game. We have the Houston Texans at the Steelers. The Steelers laid an egg today, went into Cleveland, and pretty much did not show up. They're behind pretty much the whole game, never really seemed to be in it. The Texans are going to have a little bit of a week and a half type rest. They played in that Thursday night game, lost at home to the Colts. I think that they're going to be motivated to come back and try to get a win. They're sitting at 3-3. They certainly don't want to fall 3-4. So that exact same logic applies to Pittsburgh, as they are also at 3-3. Although Houston is at 3-3 in second place in their division, and Pittsburgh is at 3-3 and in last place in their division. So it tells you a little bit about the strength of those two respective divisions. But Steelers, historically, pretty good in prime time. I think Mike Tomlin has a good prime time record, and the Steelers are certainly much more of a public team than the Texans. Because of those factors, I pick the Steelers as a field goal favorite at 3 points.
Well, great minds think alike in that regard. I also picked Pittsburgh as the 3-point favorite, just gave them credit for home field advantage, especially because the defense is so beat up. I'm certain Vegas isn't feeling too confident after the Browns were able to just rout them out of the building, whereas Houston did have a stirring comeback against the Colts and have the extra rest and have a running game similar to what you might have seen in Cleveland, gashing the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Well, Arian Foster has looked great, so I think Arian Foster will do the same. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Houston won this game. While you do say Pittsburgh has been great historically in prime time, that's very similar to saying that Ben Roethlisberger is 18-1 versus the Browns, and you should probably go on that side of the equation. Turns out history isn't always an indicator of future performance. But because we both went 3, we're going to split the pot there as well. Have the whole, if you will.
Yes, we will have the whole, and we were both pretty close. They actually threw a hook onto the field goal, so at this point the Steelers open as a 3.5-point favorite. So for the 15 games of Week 7, you are ahead 9-6. Now, after the podcast is over, we will add 5 college. There are 5 ranked versus ranked team college games next week. We'll go and do those privately off the line, and then when we record our Tuesday night podcast with all the standings through Week 6 of the Steel Scorpion Leagues, we'll let people know if I was able to pull a miraculous comeback against you, and we'll see what the results are.
I'm fairly certain I just reread the rules and that wasn't in the rules. So I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go out on the limb and say I get to rename your team now. But
Yeah, so
But be that as it may, I'm going to hold off because I don't want you to be too upset to continue on with the next couple items I want to go over of the podcast. So we'll save that for the end because I don't want you in tears for the remainder of the podcast, and your emotions getting away from you will really sour the audio.
well, I will say this. I must add that my team has been underperforming so far. I think I actually have a pretty good team. Every time I look at my roster, and in fact, this week I had the highest projection of all 12 teams, and yet somehow ended up with one of the lowest scores. So not quite sure what happened to my team, but clearly my team name right now is doing no favors to me. So I don't want to, make this win not as good for you, but I did actually kind of throw this on purpose because I clearly need a new team name. So whatever name you give me, no matter how bad it is, I think it's going to change the karma for my team and maybe turn things around. So.
Oh, it'll definitely change the karma. You may not speak to me for a while afterwards, but don't worry about that. You have 2 whole days to cool down before we do the next podcast. But now that we've gone through the lines, and I am happy that I'm victorious, obviously I thought this was a tough slate of games to call. Looking back on it now, any games stand out to you as the one or two that, if you were placing a small wager, legally of course, in a Las Vegas, which 2 games do you probably think you'd throw some money on with the lines the way they are, or maybe tie into a teaser?
Yeah, well, for a teaser standpoint, you typically want to look for a team, or at least I do. I think it's pretty common to look for a home team that's around a touchdown favorite, because the 6-point teaser, you can get that down to around 1 point, which should be fairly safe. You don't see too many 1-point margin of victories. And given that as a criterion, we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that kind of fall into that category. I would like the Bills. I mentioned that one. Although actually that one doesn't fall into the category. I was looking at my line prediction, but I thought the Bills, would be around a touchdown favorite. You had said 6. The actual line is 4.5. A rookie QB on the road. The Bills are actually not that bad, and not that Kyle Orton is anything to, be too scared of. But they actually have a pretty decent team. I would have to think that in a 2-team teaser, I think the Bills win at home versus the Vikings. And then I like the Cowboys. Usually try to not do divisional games in there. The 2 teams know each other so well, and anything can happen. But I think the Giants are going to be mentally and emotionally deflated after having just lost 27-0, after having just lost their best wide receiver. The Cowboys obviously are going to be, on cloud 9. They just went into Seattle, beat the mighty Seahawks at home. DeMarco Murray seems to be pretty much unstoppable. LaShawn McCoy just ran all over the Giants tonight. DeMarco Murray's got to be looking at that tape and just licking his chops, knowing that he's going to be going for the record of 7 straight weeks to open the season with 100 yards or more. So as far as 2-team teasers go, I'd say Cowboys and Bills.
Interesting. I do like both of those, but I actually went a different direction. So while I do agree with you, sometimes I like to take the road or the home team that's getting close to the touchdown for all the reasons you said. The other thing I sometimes like to do is look for those really horrible teams that I just don't see any way they can win the game. And there is one that stands out to me. And I think we've beat this horse so much that not only is it dead, but it's been buried with the football that Oakland has buried. And that would be Arizona at Oakland. Carson Palmer revenge game. Don't underestimate Carson Palmer getting oh, never mind. He played there for like part of a year or something. But don't underestimate the fact that Arizona's defense is going to play pretty well. And if you tease that, you're actually getting a couple points. So I wouldn't mind that one because I just don't see how Oakland wins games. Looking at that team, I'm not understanding where wins are going to come from this season. I almost would have said the same of Jacksonville, but I just don't trust Cleveland enough yet. They're not as good to me as Arizona as a complete team. Bruce Arians for Arizona, underrated as a coach. I think if you look back now, he was the offensive coordinator in Pittsburgh. They won a Super Bowl there with Big Ben. He left, goes to Indianapolis, tutors Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck's doing pretty well. Big Ben has fallen and fallen and fallen ever since Arians has left. Arians went, helped Luck. He's gone out, turned Arizona into a pretty decent squad. Last year they were a quality team that didn't make the playoffs, sitting at 10-6. right now, alone atop the NFC West, the supposed toughest division in football. I don't think you would have gotten much action if you'd walked around and asked people to bet Arizona was going to be number one in the NFC West after 6 weeks. So that's the one I think stood out to me in a teaser, and I think like you, I would probably have thrown them in with the Dallas game. I just don't see how Dallas is going to lose that game. Now, this is probably where they're going to come back and bite me because I've been such a naysayer on Dallas. But now I'll say something nice about them, and Jerry will go out drinking, go out carousing with some young 20-something-year-old women, and it's all going to come back to haunt me, I'm certain. But I would say if you're going to tease, those are the two I'd go with. And I also agree with you. That Buffalo line, both of us were throwing 6-7 points at it. It came out at 4.5. If you can get in at 4.5, that's a great line. Just take that game by itself.
I will say, I'll come on with the game that you mentioned, Cardinals and the Raiders. You, I think, somewhat jokingly said the revenge game for Carson Palmer, but I think he actually does have a little bit of revenge on his mind playing at Oakland. And I drafted Carson Palmer in our Jaguar league. I've actually held on to him this whole time, even though he's been out with the nerve damage. I think he does have potential the rest of the season. I think he does have, a little bit of revenge on his mind, like I said. Just to give you a preview, I might be multiplying him this week, so we'll see. As far as a game, not for teasing, but just taking the line, I do believe, if my records are correct, the Colts are 6-0 against the spread so far this year. They're a 3.5-point favorite at home. They're coming off a week and a half of rest since they played the Thursday night game. The Bengals, coming off the tie, might be a little bit kind of emotionally deflated, especially thinking that, Nugent was going to make that 36-yard field goal at the end to get the win, and now they come off with a tie, and they're like, a tie? What's going on here? We know that it looks likely that A.J. Cunningham is not going to play. Marvin Jones may or may not, but the Colts are on a roll. They do really well at home. Andrew Luck is just a beast. NFL, a lot of times comes down to quarterback play. I would, 100 times out of 100 rather have Andrew Luck than the Red Rocket. So at just 3.5 points, if you're one of the ones that likes to buy points to get it down to 3, you might want to consider getting it down to 3 just to cover yourself for a tie if there's a late score by Cincinnati. But I really like the Colts at 3.5 at home on a week and a half rest versus Cincinnati.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with you there. And I know, again, full disclosure for those listening, Mark is a Colts fan, so he definitely has more insight into the Colts and a better feel, but also plays the homer role for the Colts. So I want to make sure that's out there, but I agree with you. So with that, any other games you want to touch on? I think I've covered the ones I like. There are a lot I'd stay away from, honestly. When you start getting to those numbers that are around 7, especially with road teams at a 7. We saw it this week with Denver. They were a bigger number. We all knew Denver would win in New York, but Vegas knew that too, and they kept moving the number up. I think I saw it was going 10, 10.5, somewhere in that range later in the week. That's just trying to price you out of betting that game. So as you look at these, on my side, I'd say Seattle, 7 points on the road. I don't love giving 7 points at St. Louis.
Yeah, I don't love that one. There's nothing else at this point that really sticks out to me. As far as survivor picks go, of course, the obvious one is the Patriots at home versus Jets. You can't imagine a scenario where Tom Brady loses to Geno Smith at home. That one's pretty obvious. Again, you might have already used the Patriots. If not, I think the next best one is probably, I keep going back to this game, the Vikings at the Bills, especially for survivor pool. The Bills are a team that, you probably haven't taken yet, and I haven't looked at the full schedule the rest of the way, but you may not have another good opportunity to take them. But if you have a chance to take a 3-3 Bills team in your survivor pool, I think this is probably the week to do it.
Yeah, I doubt there were any chances that you took the Bills so far this season. And as you said on the schedule, they'd have the Jets coming into town later. Don't know if that's really worthy. We, as you and I have said, we like to avoid divisional rivals, and we like to avoid away games. So imagining you can only take a team one time in a survivor pool, then the Bills, this would be your 1 week to get them out of the way. If you want to go the safer route, as you said, New England or Green Bay even as a 7-point favorite hosting Carolina looks to be another one of the bigger lines. But I don't see any others that I really love. Baltimore 7 at home against against Atlanta, but Atlanta's been up and down. And I honestly think Atlanta might have the better quarterback. And I hate to pick the team that has the worst quarterback, you know?
Yeah, you're on that one.
All right, so speaking of survivor pools, this past week, I imagine most people took Denver and San Diego as we recommended last week. And if you did, congratulations, you advanced. I think after that, we might have mentioned that your third or fourth pick might be the Cincinnati Bengals. Unfortunately, for those that chose the Bengals, Mike, don't call me Ted Nugent, pushed a 36, 40-yard field goal hard to end that game. What should be a gimme for most kickers honestly looked like he was doing an impersonation of a Detroit Lions kicker from earlier this year. Any of them. Boy, did that cost not just people that bet the money line or people that just wanted Cincinnati to win the game, but survivor pool teams that took Cincinnati. Wow, that had to be heart-wrenching. For those listening to the podcast, we thank you. I said I would rename Mark's team, and I will, but I may hold off and tease this and make you come back for our Tuesday podcast so that you can hear Mark's new team name. If you want, you could also check us out on the blog at steelscorpionsports.com. Better species of fantasy football. We have multipliers, mulligans, the all-play format. Please check out the website, read the rules page, check out some of our exciting entries that we've done so far. This is the third installment of the line game that Bill Simmons and Cousin Sal have made famous. And now, I think, Mark, we can probably pass the baton back to Bill and Cousin Sal because, as you said, I believe they'll be back on the air in the next day or two.
I think they'll be back, and I think I'll be happy to pass the baton. I beat you in the first week that we did this. I kind of just eked by you 8-7, and then you got a little bit of momentum. You beat me by, I think, 8.5 to 6.5 the second week, and then, of course, this week, virtually just destroyed me at 9-6. So I am trending in a bad direction, so it's probably best for me to hang up the hat at this point.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be too sad to see this go. Although it has been fun, and we do want to wish Bill and Cousin Sal good luck in their return to the airwaves. And with that, signing off from San Diego, Jeff Miller.
Signing off from San Jose, Mark Heffel.
Thanks for listening, Steel Scorpion Sports listeners, and we'll talk to you on our regularly scheduled podcast later this week.